The dumpster fire that is 2020 has hit the United States with everything from the pandemic, systemic racism and caging children, to the hurricanes in the south and the wildfires in the west. Because we tend to be slaves to fighting the most urgent issue of the moment, the tyranny of the urgent, what is probably the greatest issue that we face on the planet, climate change, has taken a back seat. Unfortunately, by the time climate change becomes the most urgent and pressing problem at the moment, it will already be too late. So while this video may not be as fun as poking fun at Steve Anderson or Ken Ham, it's infinitely more important. So please, stick with me on this one. I promise you a spoonful of sugar at the end. We'll find a few deniers to poke fun at. Hello and welcome. The Lone Wanderer has bought me a green screen, so the new background is thanks to her. Thank you, Lone Wanderer. The link to her channel is in the description, so please subscribe to her if you haven't already. My guest today is Momma Atheist to discuss climate change, so let's just jump right in. Hello and welcome, and thank you so much for coming to join me, Momma Atheist. This is a topic that I don't know a whole lot about, but I am very interested in, and so it's wonderful to have you on this topic.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, always.
So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in education.
I started in astrophysics. That's what I got my first degree in. And then I moved over to climate science. I got my master's in climate science. So I've been working in the field for 7-8 years now. I worked originally in alternative energies, but then when I moved, I had to move to Georgia to take care of my parents, my elderly parents, and I needed to be able to get a job that I could do at home. So now I work in ecosystem preservation and projection.
Have you done any research in this area?
Yeah, we do. Part of my job is doing research. The most recent thing that I've done in researching different types of carbon capture, metal organic framework, but it's part of what we do when we present at different conferences and stuff, what we've researched, as well as the data that we have run through our simulations and stuff like that. So I've done a little bit of research. Okay. I contribute to papers, but as the one with only the masters and the one, writing them out completely. So
yeah. How long has climate change been an issue?
Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, since we started burning fossil fuels and the climate began changing. There were people back in the 19th century that started noticing changes in the temperature and stuff like that, but it wasn't until about the 70s that climate science itself really came about. And, scientists started to say, oh, this is something bad, especially with the ozone layers. That was a big deal back in the 70s and 80s. And that was why we had the Montreal Protocol that phased out the things that burned holes in the ozone layers. That's why we have fixed the ozone at this point. But yeah, it's been, climate science itself has only been around for 40 years or so, but it encapsulates all sorts of scientific disciplines. You have biology and physics and chemistry and geology and everything that you have to bring together. So it's about the 70s since they started really paying attention to what was happening in the changing climate.
One of the reasons I asked is I went to school in the 60s and 70s, and we used to talk about pollution, but I never heard of climate change back when I was in school. We thought that the depletion of the fossil fuels was a much more serious issue, and that if we would convert to clean energy, we would eliminate both the problem of pollution and the loss of fossil fuels. And so climate change really didn't even enter the picture.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely an issue. They started noticing, oh, well, there's only a limited amount of fossil fuels that are available to us. Maybe we should slow the fuck down, pulling them out of the ground and using them at alarming rates, because as you look through the 20th century, it gets worse and worse. We're using more and more. Even now, as we're aware of climate change, we're still using ridiculous amounts of fossil fuels. And there really is a finite amount. I mean, it takes millions of years for fossil fuels to happen. You can't just make them out of nowhere. So yeah, we're running out of them. But the issue is, they changed over to the issue is, oh, well, maybe burning these fossil fuels is not so great for the environment.
So often when people start talking about climate change, you hear the argument, well, how can the world be getting warmer? It's cold outside, it's snowing outside. What's the difference between climate and weather?
Well, weather is what happens in the atmosphere short term. So it's a snowstorm, it's a rainy day, it's a sunny day. That's weather. Climate is what happens in the atmosphere long term. So you have climate zones throughout the world. You have places that are, warm in the summer, cooler in the winter. That's what climate is. It's not, it's over the long term what happens with the weather, I guess you could say, in terms of not short term. Unfortunately, that gets confused a lot. People think that climate scientists are just, well-paid meteorologists, and that's not true. We deal with more than just what's happening with the weather. Okay. But the weather is a big part of it. And know that just because there are still places on the planet that have snow and stuff, that doesn't mean that the climate isn't changing. That's just happens to be a big stopping point for some of the people that fight against climate change, saying, oh, look, like the idiot senator that came into the floor of the Senate with a snowball and said, see, climate change isn't real. Yeah. That's not how it works. So
How much differentiation in climate can the planet tolerate without seeing major significant changes?
Well, we're already there. I mean, we're already seeing major significant changes throughout a lot of the planet. And unfortunately, there are places that are on the globe that are more affected than others, specifically in the southern atmosphere around the equator and in the Arctic. Those are the three worst places that are being affected by climate change. But we have come to the conclusion that once we hit a rise in average global temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius, that is it. We cannot come back from that. And right now we're a little bit over 1 degree Celsius. And we are, at the rate that we're going right now, we're raising about 1/10 of a degree a decade. Although projections, which I don't love, it's not great to do, but some projections say that we have until the end of this decade before it's irreversible if we don't do something about it now.
How are greenhouse gases measured?
You have different spots that have control tower type things. They will collect. It's really best to collect in areas that have a lot of wind, and they just collect samples of air in glass flasks, and they run it through a gas spectrometer to see how much of certain elements are in the air that they collected. So that's how they're able to tell how much carbon, how much nitrous oxide, how much methane that is in the atmosphere in certain areas of the planet.
Okay. And how long have scientists been measuring greenhouse gas levels?
Over 100 years. I don't know exactly how long, but I know that in the early 20th century, it was something that they had started to do and started to notice.
And at what point did it become clear that this was getting to be a significant issue for the planet?
Like I said, in the 70s was when they started really noticing, in terms of how much of a problem is this and what is causing that problem, only really within the last 30 years, to be honest with you.
Okay. And what's causing the increase in greenhouse gases?
Humans burning fossil fuels mostly. I mean, there are a lot of contributions to climate change, but the main significant issue is the burning of fossil fuels from humans. And it's something that people in climate science agree with. Most scientists agree with.
One thing that we've seen occasionally is talk about the contribution of cows and farms. And I think there was an unfortunate remark from a climate scientist that was taken out of context that's caused some of this. How significant is the contribution from farming?
Methane is an issue. There's a lot of methane that is produced from cows, but you have to also remember that we are breeding cows at a very significant rate for human consumption. So regardless of the fact that the methane is coming from the cows, this is still our fault. So
Interesting. I had not seen it that way.
yeah.
Is there a consensus among the scientific community on the issue of climate change?
97% agree. That not only is, I mean, everybody knows that all the scientists know that climate change is real, but 97% of the scientists agree that it is a man-made thing. And this is an interesting part of it, though, is because up until the 2000s, they weren't looking for a reason. It wasn't, they were just, oh, this is a problem. You know, what's happening? How high is the temperature getting? What is being affected by the rise in global temperature? It wasn't until the early 2000s that there were a couple scientists that gathered all of the climate science data that they could, all the papers, all the data from, I think it was 30 or 40 years. It took everything and they went through it all, and they found that only a third of what they had read through even hinted at what could cause climate change, but 97% of that third said that it was humans. And then the same thing happened a few years later. They went through and they did a consensus. They sent out a poll pretty much to all the major scientists and anybody that was related to the community, people that worked in geology, people that worked in physics, mostly people that worked in climate science. And once again, it came down to that 97% said, yes, humans cause climate change. This is our fault. So,
okay, with so much consensus among the scientific community, why do you think it is that we still see so much denial of climate change?
agreed. Because it just comes like the fossil fuel industry would be dead if, you know, if everybody said, this is the problem, we need to fix it, we need to go to alternative energy, and we need to stop burning fossil fuels. And big oil has it, they are the biggest lobbying group in Washington. They have a lot of power. I have said before that a lot of these politicians that come out and deny climate change, I just think they're straight up lying because they're in the pockets of big oil. There are some companies that are changing over, some big oil companies that are implementing alternative energy plans and are trying to move over because they know that that's coming, that eventually they're going to have to. And quite frankly, it's not a hard transition. It's still energy. Energy is the biggest industry on our planet, and they're also the biggest polluter on our planet. So big oil does not want to let go of the billions and billions of dollars that they're losing every year. So they lobby hard. And then it happens to be a big right-wing talking point because they have decided, let's go with the anti-science crowd, which is the right wing. And they picked them and they have stuck with it ever since. And the thing is that in most of the rest of the planet, this is not even an issue. This is not a question. For some reason in America, it is. And actually, there's something I'd like to point out really quick about the debate last night, something that the president said, if that's okay.
There's a comment in the chat. I was just waiting for a pause to bring this up. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Rage also said that, Rage said, I'm still triggered by the cleanest rivers and purest air statement from last night. Knock was actually watching it with us. Hi, Knock. I hope you're feeling better. He also said that our carbon levels are down more than they've been in 35 years. And that's just bullshit. In fact, in 2018, we had the highest level in years. Yes, carbon emissions are down a little bit right now because of COVID, because people are not traveling, because they're using less fossil fuels, they're not getting in their cars, they're not getting in planes as much. So it's down a little bit, but it's not because of anything he's done. And our air and water is not the cleanest it's ever been because he's taken away. He's trying to get rid of 99 different environmental laws and protections. He's made it up to, I think, 70 something at this point. He's got a little bit more to go, but he keeps reversing all of the environmental laws and policies that we have in our country, protecting the water, protecting the air. It is not okay anymore. We cannot afford 4 more years of Trump. One of the first things he did when he went into office was take away funding from science, specifically climate science. So he fucked us right away. And he continues to do this. He continues to open the path for big oil to drill wherever he wants. He's allowing them to do it in national forests. He's allowing them to do it in, in the forests in Alaska. That was one of the things that was just changed. I think it was less than 2 weeks ago. He got that passed where in national protected forests in Alaska, you're allowed to go off the path and pretty much do whatever you want anymore. He passed that law. It is not good. And it is not true. And we need to remember that he's a liar. And if we continue to have him as a president, we are one of the biggest producers of carbon emissions in the world. 14% of carbon emissions, regardless of the fact that we do not have 14% of the population, comes from the US. So we need to fix that, and we need to fix it fast.
I had a question based on something you said a little earlier, and there's a comment in the chat here that's kind of regarding it. He says, we need oil for the next 100 years minimum. I was going to ask you, if we put all of our efforts we could into switching from fossil fuels to alternative fuels, how quickly could we make that change?
I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure involved in changing over from, into alternative energy. Plus, you have to consider that there are a lot of different alternative energies depending on the area, depending on what's right. But it can be done. I can't give you a time frame, but it's definitely not. We do not need oil for 100 more years. We could, I'm not saying we could stop today because there are too many things that are dependent on it, but it could very easily be switched within 5-10 years if we really put efforts into it and put the money into it. The Green New Deal, it sounds insane. It's very expensive, but it's a starting point. It's a place where we can say, okay, these are the things that we need to do, and we need to move forward with it. And that's one of the things that I like about Biden. I'm not a fan of his, but he has worked with Bernie Sanders, who worked with AOC on the Green New Deal, to say, okay, this is something that's important, something that we need to look into and change. It's not going to be overnight. It could take a long time, like I said, infrastructure, money, time, but no, not 100 years. We could easily, within a decade, be done with fossil fuels forever and be perfectly fine.
Wow, that is interesting. I had no idea we could do it that quickly.
Yeah.
Do you think the regulations that they're putting in California to try to change over to electric cars are going to be effective?
They could be if Trump stopped screwing with them, because he actually went back and reversed the emission standards and lowered them. He claimed it is specifically in California, I think New York as well. He claimed it was as a way for people to buy cheaper cars during COVID or whatever, but that was just bullshit. He was working, for big oil. It was the same. It's the same thing. But no, if we really try, if we put these implementations into place and make them laws, it could happen. We just have to do it together. We have to do it not only as a country, we have to do it globally. This is the only way that we're going to fix this.
I think the West Coast fires and the hurricanes really helped people in this country to see how much climate change is already starting to affect us. Can you comment on how those go hand in hand?
Well, extreme weather patterns are a huge, a huge part of climate change. Like, for instance, the fires, that happens because there's more drought in the area now. As the temperatures rise, you have drier, warmer winters that completely dry out some of the old foliage, and you end up with fire seasons like this. As for things like hurricanes, as the global temperature rises, so does the temperature of the sea. And as that happens, you end up with more intense weather systems. You end up with more hurricanes, bigger hurricanes more often. It is what it is. It's very obvious. If you look back 20, 30 years, we weren't getting hit, by 30 hurricanes in the season that were killing us. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, people in very red states are getting screwed by this. They're the ones getting hit the worst with the hurricanes. And they're still, they still have their senators saying that climate change isn't real, and they're the ones that need the help. They need FEMA to come in, and denying it is not going to help. We need to be able to fix the problem before we completely wipe out some parts of the United States because of this. They're still working on New Orleans from 2005.
Yeah.
So it's still not great there. And this is going to keep happening over and over again.
Mm-hmm. How do you respond to people who say that this is going to go away on its own?
I've tried speaking with climate deniers. I've given them the facts, I've given them the science, and some people are really stuck in place about it. So there isn't much you can do other than say, educate yourself. Don't be fooled by what big oil and the right wing are trying to feed to you. This is not what science is saying. And science is everything. Me personally, since I could probably walk, I've always been interested in how the world works and always wanted to be a scientist. So you have to question things. You have to see cause and effect. You can't just listen to what Fox News is saying and then take it all in. You have to find multiple sources and come to the conclusions yourself. Sources that are actually reputable and scientific. But it's people, when they only listen to stuff like Fox News and they only listen to their right-wing people, they're hard to change. You can't really change. It's the same with religion. Sometimes, there's no way you can change someone's mind when they're that far deep into it, but you just try to educate them as best you can. Tell them this is how it is. This is the science. Educate yourself. If you can't believe it, and I'm sorry for you.
I think this is why people like you are so important, because those scientific papers that you refer to, some of us will look at them and we get maybe 4 or 5 sentences in and say, this is too difficult. There's too many hard words in here. Some of them, we look at and we get bored about halfway through, because even if we can grasp it, it's not something we deal with every day. Yeah. So people who can read that, people like you who can read that and digest it down to something that's what we really need to see. And that's the other thing is, papers like that have so much information, and we only need a little bit for our own personal lives. And that's why I think that what you are doing is so important, because you digest that information down to the parts that everyday people like me need.
Thank you. That's what I try to do on my channel. I come out with videos, climate science videos, and just trying to make them what the language that I use, but try to make it, so everybody can understand it. And because this is pretty much the worst thing that our planet has ever faced. And unfortunately, it's not something that people are taking enough interest in. They're not doing enough about it. And sometimes I feel like I'm screaming into the void, because it's like, we're in a lot of trouble here. And I understand that this virus is a huge deal, but it's eventually going to go away. Climate change is not, unless we actually do something about it and fix it. So I just try to communicate that as best I can.
And that brings me right to my next question, which is, what can we as individuals do to do our part for climate change?
Little things, recycle, try to walk more, hang your clothes out to dry, become involved. If you can get solar panels, that'd be great. Be able to get a net zero house as much as you can. Pay attention to what you do, because it's the little things that really add up. When you're going 1/10 of a mile down the street to the store or whatever, and you feel the need to drive every time, that's ridiculous. You don't need to do that. Just be aware of what you do, the little tiny things. But if you can also get involved on a bigger scale, become an activist, let people hear that this is a problem. Don't allow me to be the only one screaming into the void here. Just because I have the degree doesn't mean other people can't chime in. If we all chime in and say, this is a problem, we need to fix it, because that's what we need. We need our government to hear that. We need them to hear that we are concerned about this. So you need to call your senators, you need to call your representatives and say, do something about this. Because if you don't, we're screwed, and that's not okay. So
One of the things that I said to Robin is, I'm going to be gone before this is at the point where, we're at the point of no return, but you won't. And so we've
Yeah.
got to do this for our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah. And I'll still be here, unfortunately. It looks like, for a while, it didn't seem like that. For a while, it was just working toward, I have a 16-year-old, what I was doing for his future. But the situation that we're looking at now, it's very well possible that I will see in my lifetime huge, huge effects of climate change if we don't do anything about it. But you're right. People like Trump who know he's going to be dead in a decade, he doesn't care. Even though he has children, but he doesn't really care about his children either. This is about and it's not just about humans. Okay. The rate of extinction of species on our planet is enormous right now. We're in the 6th mass extinction event. And it's because of climate change. It's because of the rapid heating of our planet. The ecosystems are crumbling because of what's going on. What we're seeing is around 30,000 species a year going extinct, but that's probably on the low end because there are a lot of species we don't even know about right now. So we're thinking somewhere closer to 50,000 are dying a year. That's a lot.
I thought it was because humans were taking over their habitats and destroying their habitats.
That's part of it too, but a lot of it has to do with their habitats just being destroyed. That's what I do is I take the data for animals that are endangered and see how their climate is changing and see how the changing climate, how the changing temperatures, the changing water will affect their populations in the future. And what that changing population will do because when you have an ecosystem, every single species works together in it. So when you lose a species in an ecosystem, that ecosystem can fall apart. So we also try to predict what will happen once. And there's also a chance that there's another species that will step in and take over, for that species. But we see what will happen as the climate continues to change in that ecosystem. Yes, humans are taking over a lot of their habitats, but it's also the changing climate that is killing them in rapid rates.
Do you think it would be helpful if we all became vegans?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it probably would to an extent. There are a lot of issues with veganism as well. Yes, we need to cut down on our meat consumption big time. That is a huge contributor to climate change. The amount of fossil fuels that we need in order to grow livestock and house them and feed them and ship them and everything like that, it is a lot. And you're talking about an energy transfer of only 10% from what they ate as plants. So we would have gotten 100% of that energy from the plants as opposed to the 10% of energy from the meat. As a thought experiment, yes, it would probably work, but there are issues in our food system as it is because of transporting food, the way we grow food. There are still problems with just the vegetables and the vegan market as well. It would make a difference if we all went vegan. It's just not possible, and we really, really, really need to cut down on our meat consumption. There are people that eat meat 3 times a day. You need to eat meat maybe 3 times a week. If we could cut it down to that would make a huge, huge difference in the amount of fossil fuels we burned in terms of raising the livestock.
You've mentioned that we all need to do our part to talk to our congressmen about this issue. What specifically should we be urging them to do?
We should be urging them to try to get back into Paris, first of all, because even though Paris is flawed, by taking us out of Paris, it screws the rest of the world because we were all connected in terms of trading carbon emissions and things like that. And we were a huge part of that. By leaving it, we ended up screwing the rest of the world. And like I said, the only way we can fight this is to do it globally. Paris wasn't perfect, but that was important. We also need to fight, tell them to fight against all these regulations and environmental laws that are being taken away. Stand up for that. Say, no, we are not going to screw with the Clean Air Act because Trump just wants to and hates the environment. We need to make sure and we need to talk to them about just energy plans in general. Say that we are for the Green New Deal or something similar to it and fight for it. Tell them that climate change is a big issue to you and you need it addressed.
Do you think the Biden-Harris team goes far enough in addressing this issue?
No, okay. I don't, but it's vastly better than what Trump has. I would have loved Bernie's plan. Bernie had a great plan, and he has been fighting for the environment since the 70s. Like Bernie's the guy, and he's known for as long as it's been a problem, as long as we've been aware that it's a problem, and he's been fighting for it. So he is knowledgeable about the science. He's knowledgeable about what needs to be done. Luckily, Biden has, talked to Bernie and taken some of his suggestions. One of the issues is the fracking thing, which was, Miss Harris had said at her debate that Biden wouldn't stop fracking. But the thing is, if you look at his plan, he's talking about, phasing fracking out completely. It will, under his plan, get rid of it. It's just a matter of phasing instead of stopping it, dead in its tracks. Unfortunately, I wish she had gone into that instead of just saying, oh, he's not getting rid of fracking. But he is trying to work toward something. And I really think that Biden would put us back into Paris. So that's important.
Okay.
Yes, and that's another thing. Green energy is, it could be extremely profitable. At the very least, it's just a transition over from fossil fuels to green energy. Most of the people that work in the big oil areas, on the rigs and the pipelines and stuff like that, could be trained to work on the turbines. They could work in the solar panels. It's not a hard transition, and there is a ton of money to be made once the infrastructure is set out of green energy. And that is probably another reason too why some of the big oil companies, not Exxon, are looking toward the future with green energy.
Okay. Let's have a little bit of fun. If you could say anything you wanted to a climate denier, and particularly the denier in chief, what would you say?
You might well possibly have killed us all, you stupid dick. Bean mentioned how horrible fracking is. And yes, it is. If you don't know what fracking is, it is for getting natural gas out of the ground, and they have to, in order to get to the pockets of natural gas, they have to inject a bunch of high pressured water into these rock formations to kind of break them apart and pull the natural gas out. So you end up getting chemicals into the water system. You end up messing with the land. You have sinkage from the land because you're breaking apart parts really underneath the surface. It is not a great thing. Unfortunately, stopping it completely right now would probably, Biden is probably right. We need to be able to phase it out. I wish we could phase it out faster. Yes, you are my favorite pig. Thank you very much, Matt Pig. But fracking is one of the, and Brian actually said this. He was like, fracking was the worst last night. And I said, probably not the worst, but definitely up there on the top, like 3 things that are really bad for the environment. Fracking is not great. So, but, Biden's phasing it out while Trump is trying to increase it.
When I was in school, we talked a lot about strip mining, and the big evil was strip mining. Is that, is fracking about on level with strip mining for?
Fracking is worse. Fracking is so much worse.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Luckily, it's not in a lot of areas. The same with strip mining. It's not like you can find that everywhere. There are places in Texas, there are places in Pennsylvania that have areas where fracking can, there aren't natural gas pockets everywhere. It depends on where you find it. But where it is in that area, it's very dangerous. It's very detrimental to the environment of that area, and it could spread. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been very educational, and Amanda has full videos on climate change on her channel. So if you are not subscribed to Amanda, please subscribe to Amanda and watch what she has to say there, and continue to watch for more videos, as I know that she's going to put out more information on this topic as well.
Yep. Thank you very much for having me.
Any other closing comments?
Just vote. Honestly, they say this is the most important election. It really is. Our planet cannot take another 4 more years of Trump. This is not me exaggerating here. I'm actually working on a video that will come out before the election to explain why. Please vote. It just to save our planet. This is one of the ways you can do it, by getting Trump the hell out of office, please.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
I hate clean air and water. I don't care how much companies pollute rivers and streams. I don't even like trees. I just care about tax cuts. Who am I? Well, that's easy. I'm a conservative.
I took that out of context, but I promised you a spoonful of sugar, and here it is. That was PragerU's take on liberal views of conservatives. I don't even need to pick apart what he says that we should do. It's just too funny on its own.
The environmentalists say the best way, the only way, is through massive federal and even international regulations. Conservatives say the best way to protect the environment is by protecting property rights and encouraging innovation, safer, more efficient power, nuclear, geothermal, biomass, anything that generates energy at a price consumers want and can afford to pay. The worst environmental offenders have been big, repressive, socialist governments. This was true in the last century, and it's true now. China, for example, pumps roughly twice as much carbon into the air each year as the United States.
He seems to have forgotten that China has 4 times our population. They have 4 times the people, but only produce twice as much pollution. Must be because they have big repressive socialist governments. Yep, that's the reason. Think Ken Ham will be any better?
That's the topic of our Easter conference, climate change, physical and spiritual. But you're a geologist. You have a PhD in geology.
God is in charge of what's happening on the earth. He always has been. And that's what we want to remind people at the conference. I want to talk about the flood as the only catastrophic climate change event that has occurred on the earth.
Nope, they are all still stuck on Noah's Ark. There have been no catastrophic climate events other than the flood. The ice ages that AIG agrees has happened were not climate change. How can an ice age not be climate change? And of course, no discussion of climate change denial would be complete without the denier-in-chief. Here's his position over the years.
President Trump believes climate change is a hoax. We know this because he has said it over and over again.
So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that, and a lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax. I mean, it's a money-making industry, okay? It's a hoax.
The president has tweeted climate change skepticism at least 115 times, including a claim that the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese.
I wish you could go to Greenland, watch these huge chunks of ice just falling into the ocean, raising the sea levels.
And you don't know whether or not that would have happened with or without man. You don't know.
Well, you're scientists at
no,
NOAA and
we have
NASA.
Scientists that disagree with that.
What an impact that would make.
I'm not denying climate change, but it could very well go back. You know, we're talking about over millions of years.
Mr. President, there was a significant talk at the summit about climate change. I know in the past you've harbored some skepticism of a science and climate change. What do you think the world should be doing about climate change, and do you still harbor that skepticism?
Josh, in a nutshell, I want the cleanest water on Earth. I want the cleanest air on Earth. And I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. And I think I know more about the environment than most people. I want a wealthy country. We can't let that wealth be taken away. Clean air, clean water. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you.
As the governor said, we've had temperatures explode this summer. You may have learned that we broke a world record in the Death Valley, 130 degrees. But even in greater LA, 120 plus degrees. And we're seeing this warming trend make our summers warmer, but also our winters warmer as well. So I think one area of mutual agreement and priority is vegetation management. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay. It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
You might well possibly have killed us all, you stupid dick.
And with that, I say, until next time, live your life.